What's going on, guys? Let's give a huge shout out to Editor X for sponsoring this video, and let's jump in. Hey guys, now that we've seen the Content Manager interface, we're ready to start creating our data for our homepage slider. The first thing is, I'm gonna want a description, of course, and a summary. So we're gonna first need a couple of titles. I'm gonna create these ones pretty quickly here. First one is movies. We're gonna need games. For now, I'm gonna keep the summary empty. The next field type that we want is an image. So we're gonna need a cover or a poster of some sort. We're gonna create that as the field type image. Pretty simple. If you remember the design that we have, we created this really cool number system. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would just be the order of how we're going to sort them by. We can change this field type to a number. And then finally, we're going to create a couple of fields, one for the URL so that we know where we're going to send this to. And also, if we're going to have a button, we're going to need to create the label. So the label could be something like button label. Very, very simple. This is just a text field. It's not sensitive data, so we can just leave that like that. All right, and so now that we have that in there, we can start adding the content, of course, and uploading every single image. Again, if you remember, I've already uploaded these images here. So for example, this for the movie, we can swap that out here. The order would just be like this, 1, 2, 3, and then we have number 5. We can sort these by, if we want it by the field type, so order them like this. So from low to high. Now we have movies first, games. Let's go ahead and add the images for each one. This would be games. Now doing this will take some time. So what I recommend you guys do, if you're working off a different database and you need to import the content over into our page, what you could do instead is basically remove all these fields. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on these 3 dots and I'm going to import items from a CSV file. And this is where we want to map out each field to the data that's found on the CSV. It's actually really simple. All you have to do is select the image, make sure that that is mapping out to the correct field. In this case, it's image. You can see some examples. The URLs is empty, but the button labels are pretty good. So let's click next. It's just going to show us a little quick preview, making sure that everything looks good. Okay, and then we click import. There we go. So now we have the data correctly mapped to each of the fields in our content manager. All right, and so what we want to do is now connect or sync this data with our slider. And in order to do that, we need to head over to our design. And because this is already a repeater, all we really have to do is sync that repeater to that content. But the way this works is using a sort of like a bridge. This bridge is called a data set. If we go over to our content manager, under the add content elements, we can grab the data set. It's going to act as a little bridge between what we have here as a repeater with our content. I'm going to stick around with you as you scroll down, but this data set is not configured yet. So as you can see here, I'm kind of moving this around. Let me zoom out here just a little bit. And there we go. We have a little bit more space to play with. From here, we can decide how we're going to connect this to that repeater. If you click under settings, it's going to ask what collection do you want to use on this data set. We're going to go ahead and select featured content. We're going to call it, I don't know, we can even call it like bridge 1 if we wanted to. But in this case, just call it featured for the simplicity of it. The mode is going to be read only, meaning we're only going to pull this data and display it. So we're not going to actually submit any content to that collection. It's just going to read it and then display it. the number of items we want to display. So let's just keep that to 12. And it gives us a couple of options to filter and sort. Now, let's not worry about this yet. Let's just make sure that we have this data set connected to this repeater. All right, so now that we have that set up, we want to select our actual repeater element. And then selecting the repeater, we can manage the items or simply use this little icon here to connect to data. And what that's going to do, it's going to open up a kind of a tool that's going to show up what data set do we want to connect this repeater to. And because we've already dropped in our data set, we can select the featured, which is the name that we gave to this data set. And then we can choose right from here, what are the components, what are the actual layers in our card that we want to connect to. Now we can go one by one, basically, and using this little icon, we can connect this field to a specific data, right? So for example, connect this to a featured data set, and then the text, we can choose from any of the elements that is in our collection. We're going to use the number in our collection list. When you connect any element to the data set, it's not really going to show right away what the content is unless we click preview. But one thing I really like about Editor X is that they basically let you select the repeater itself. So for example, if I click on the repeater, then look at the connection items. I don't have to go one by one. I can do it all entirely from here. So that's really neat. I can go in here and select the image that I want to use. In this case, I'm going to use the image collection field. You can decide what alt text to use. In this case, I'm going to use the title. We're going to go back to our connections. Okay, for the button, again, this button has both the label and the action. So what we want to do is select the URL, and then the label is going to be the button label. It's very simple. And again, this text will be the summary, the actual summary that we need to connect it to, just like that. There we go. So now if we preview this design, thanks to the data set that we created, all the content that we're pulling is now pulled from our database, which is really cool. So you can see here you have the image, you have the title, the summary, and all the buttons have their own unique label, which is awesome. This is exactly what we're trying to do. And I'm really excited about the possibilities that we can do with this amazing content management system. Hopefully this makes sense and we can start applying it in more advanced scenarios. So let's jump to our next lesson and talk about dynamic pages. I'll see you there.